Now, perhaps there should be some sympathy for any Shadow Chancellor having to respond on the hoof to a long and detailed awesome statement, and maybe an allowance made for Commons theatrics. But many on Labour's front bench team today looked less than impressed with John McDonnell's speech in response to the Chancellor, even before he did this.
To assist Comrade Osborne in his dealings with his newfound comrades, I brought him along Mao's little red book. Let me quote, Mr. Speaker. But we must not to pretend to know what we do not know. I thought it would come in handy for him in his new relationship.
So the Shadow Chancellor literally stood at the dispatch box and read out from Mao's little red book. And look, it's his personal signed copy.
Well, I've been speaking to the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, and I began by asking him if there are any of the Chancellor's cuts he'd go along with.
No, I'm really concerned that we've pushed him back on some issues, and we've had some real victories today, but there's still some significant cuts I'm worried about. We've discovered on the child tax credits, we've had a huge victory pushing him back on that, but it looks as though there'll be $3 billion withdrawn from families over the length of this Parliament associated with universal credit. So there are some real problems within the detail as we analyse these cuts now. And I remember this was the day when the Chancellor was supposed to announce that the whole of the deficit had been wiped out and austerity was coming to an end. The deficit hasn't wiped out, it's still significant, and unfortunately austerity measures are still being implemented.
Isn't the problem credibility? I mean, you need to be seen as credible. Do you think you are at the moment?
I think we're building up our credibility. It's going to take some time, but we're doing it in a new way, really. We're trying to really engage with people, and we're trying to really engage them in politics as well, and do that in a more exciting way.
I mean, if you were in charge now, when do you think you'd be able to pay off the deficit?
Well, it would depend on the sustainability of the economic growth that we developed, and we would not set a date at this point in time specifically. We would really judge it year by year about what's needed. So I just give you an example on that.
So you may just keep extending it, is what I mean.
No, not at all. Let me give you this example. Okay. We can balance the books in terms of just day-to-day expenditure. We think really by 2019-20, and that's realistic according to how we look at the economy at the moment. I don't think that's going to change. It depends on the economic circumstances, and actually that's what George Osborne has said as well. But what we wouldn't do is we wouldn't constrain investment, borrowing to invest, because that's the way in which you get your economy growing.
Just coming back to credibility, I mean, your performance in the Commons is taking some stick this evening because of the Chairman Mao stunt that seems to have backfired.
Yes, I don't think it has backfired. I've been ribbing the government for quite a while now about the sell-off of assets, and particularly to the Chinese state as well, because I'm worried about selling British assets to foreign countries that then impacts upon our balance of payment because the income gets sucked out of our economy. Now, I wanted to rib George Osborne about that today because, again, I wanted to highlight the fact he's selling off another $5 billion worth of our assets. And I said in the speech, look, they've sold off the family silver, they're virtually selling off our furniture now, and that can't be right. And although I've got some stick for doing it in that way, it's allowed me to get that issue on the agenda now.
The trouble is, you brandished a copy of Mao's little red book, and you know, you are in many people's minds exactly the kind of Labour politician who probably has it in his pocket. I mean, was it actually your personal copy?
Well, I dug it. I found it underneath a pile of books in my study, which I must have had when I was a student. I can't even remember it. But I thought, actually, I'll give it to George Osborne as an indication of my concerns about his flogging off of British assets. And to be frank, I don't think we would be talking about that issue if I hadn't done it. So in a jocular way, I've got the message across.
Well, in a similar vein, I mean, you gave a quote to him. Let me give one to you from Mao's little red book. Lifting a rock only to drop it on one's own feet is a Chinese folk saying to describe the behaviour of certain fools.
Well, fair enough. And again, you would not be having this discussion with me about the flogging off of assets if I hadn't brandished that red book. So it's had that effect. Now, you're obviously more knowledgeable about Mao than I am, so thank you for that quote.